A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back once again to HJN Super Graphics, where I'm going to go on ahead and talk a bit more about the indie side of games here. I mean, we've covered a lot of games that circumnavigated along the likes of various popular companies like Square Enix and some not so great pieces by Outright Games or even Ubisoft. But let's take a break from a lot of that, for now at least, and start talking a bit about Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge for number 2612. Well, this game itself really does bring about the likes of both nostalgia and indie vibes that we would have gotten from some other games out there. Because after all, this was a title that was in fact developed and published by smaller companies. No, this wasn't anything like Konami or any other companies that had the likes of the Turtles in their grasp. No, this was the combination of Tribute Games and Dotemu. Between the both of these guys, they were able to give us a unique side-scrolling beat-em-up that sure did feel like something straight out of the arcades back in the day. Certainly something to go along with the likes of Final Fight, Streets of Rage, or others of its own type. And I guess you could say that despite this being about 30 years after the likes of beat-em-ups being popular, especially with the Nintendo and Sega consoles taking this into account, this still was actually a unique piece that I bought brand new when it came out in June 2022, not long after my birthday. On top of all that, my playthrough of the game itself sure was quite a doozy. The title itself does suggest that this not only gives us a piece of what the original 1987 continuity, especially with the famous cartoon, came about to, but Shredder's Revenge in fact does focus on the likes of the arch nemesis of the Ninja Turtles, April O'Neil, Master Splinter, and other such friendly characters that we've come to know about over the years. He comes back after being defeated multiple times by the Turtles, as the cartoon basically showcased. It was a long-running show running from 1987 to 1996. And man, that's a good amount of time to spend on one cartoon. And even more so when you get to know the fact that the nostalgia going around in that factor is quite impressive. Similar feats had been accomplished with other Ninja Turtles cartoons coming and going just as well. Like in 2003, when Konami went together alongside 4Kids and made their own Ninja Turtles cartoon just as well. I'd say the 4Kids version and the Konami version, or the 87 version as it's usually called, they both did really well, keeping us entertained over the years. And I can't believe that I've had to marathon through both shows over the years, just so I could eventually talk about them on YouTube. But hey, I might have to revisit those at some point. Anyways though, Shredder's Revenge does in fact star the likes of Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, or Raphael, the four Turtles that we know and love, with their unique headbands distinguishing them apart, as opposed to the comics which kept them all the same color, not to mention their unique weaponry, size, nunchucks, the gaffing staff, and katanas. And it's fair to say, it's the same old Ninja Turtles action that we remember way back in the day. It wasn't anything like nowadays, where the Ninja Turtles could pretty much do anything at this point. They could get buff. They could equip themselves with a lot of different gadgets. They could transform into other creatures, like dragons, for instance. And then, of course, there's the variety of enemies that come around just as well. With Shredder's Revenge, this sets us up on a unique adventure through the likes of Manhattan, Coney Island, and the sewers. But we certainly can't forget that apart from taking down the actual foot soldiers, which are the ubiquitous name given to the common enemies that Shredder is known to send out to the Turtles and attack them, we can't forget about the mini-boss characters. Of course, a lot of Shredder's best henchmen would have to include the duo known as Rocksteady and Bebop, basically a rhino and a warthog, with anthropomorphic physicalities to them and features. But then of course came along other characters that were introduced just as well, like Toka and Razar, for instance, a snapping turtle and a wolf, And then, of course, there came by other characters as well. One of which that we certainly will never forget would have to be Krang. Krang was basically one of the most formidable foes, possibly even more than Shredder himself. Shredder is known to be the sworn nemesis of the Turtles, but Krang, on occasion, especially in the 87 era of the Turtles, happened to do so much more than what even Shredder himself would do. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. But with all the action that has unfolded, all the beating up, and all the button mashing that I've had to do, possibly causing my thumbs to get pretty stiff, I can at least input a couple of different pros and cons here. The graphics, for instance, are rather bright and colorful, just as what one would have expected out of a arcade-style, side-scrolling beat-em-up. Then on top of all that, with these indie designers having given their best all in order to give us the best potential resolution. I mean, I was playing on a 4K TV at the time when I got this game, and I could certainly tell you, it's more than worth just to get the best clear picture you can possibly get. And even more so when you realize the fact it doesn't exactly appear too bright or too out of place color scheme wise. It does give us the perfect blend of hue, saturation, and brightness in order to truly feel like New York City and a unique breeding ground for crime where the Turtles can always be there to stop them. And then, of course, we know that in spite of the fact that beat-em-ups are deemed as monotonous, in this case, they definitely send you a variety of enemies. Like I've said, the foot soldiers aren't the only variety that you need to be on the lookout for. If you remember when I talked about the Cowabunga collection a little while ago, there were similar feats that they were able to execute in those older games just as well, like Turtles in Time on Super Nintendo. And it seems that Shredder's Revenge does give us a similar sort of approach because we're not only seeing side-scrolling action and beat-em-up stuff, but there's also the occasional cutscenes and other things that unfold just as well. And that's probably one other thing that distinguishes this from the olden days that happened 30 years prior. Because after all, cutscenes in games, they weren't very common back in the day. Although we can at least chalk it up to the fact that CD technology and all those crappy consoles that came with it, like 3DO, Sega CD, the Dreamcast, yeah, they were not so great consoles, even for their time. But it still was a rather important part. CDs became the most progressive piece possible, and while digital gaming seems to be our most convenient thing in order to get a hold of games quickly, even if they're on the more obscured side and hard to find, we can always purchase them with the tap of a few buttons, and of course the inputting of our passwords, email, credit information, yeah. Personal information giving away. In essence, we're giving into the fishers. But apart from all that sort of stuff, Shredder's Revenge was an amazing game. Certainly one worth playing, and one that does in fact invoke a similar series of emotional tangibility as another certain side-scrolling beat-em-up series, Streets of Rage. Yeah, I've mentioned that Shredder's Revenge does have the likeness of Streets of Rage, but there was of course a fourth title that came out 2 years before Shredder's Revenge. Yeah. In spring of 2020 came along Streets of Rage 4, proof that the beat-em-up genre is still alive and well. And with this title, it seems like that won't change. I mean, when you think about it, even Scott Pilgrim got his own beat-em-up game, which felt even more nostalgic due to it having NES-like music in its backgrounds. But other than that though, this being a good indie game with the side-scrolling beat-em-up action and unique nostalgic vibes that we got out of the Turtles, as well as the original 8-bit/16-bit era of gaming, does in fact allow for me to give this game an overall score of 8.8 out of 10.1. So almost masterpiece level, but still not exactly enough to really shine this one through. And I will admit, while there's been other Ninja Turtles games that have come out since then, a good bunch of which have unfortunately not made us proud, OG and Game Mill are really ripping them apart. Like, even Mindpulp has talked a bit about the most recent title in the franchise that we've gotten for the PS4 and PS5, showing that not all Turtles games are going to be sparkles and sunshine. This being an indie piece, though, made a lot of us feel pretty lucky. So, of course, that does it for this episode. I'll see you guys tomorrow for more of this stuff, and as always, if you want to see more on HJN Graphix, or Super Graphix in this case, where I got many more games worth talking about, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side.